Good morning, Year 8. So I hope you've all had a really pleasant half term and you'd have a lovely rest. Obviously, the hope is that this will only be online learning for the next 2 weeks and then we'll all get to be back in school together, and I'm really hopeful that that is the case. So we're going to move on to a new topic, and that new topic will continue when you come back into the academy. So our new topic is Gothic fiction, which is a personal favourite of mine. I love a little bit of Gothic fiction. So the hope is that I'm going to teach you all about Gothic fiction, its conventions, its features, its originality, and also so that you are able to then create your own pieces of Gothic fiction with all of those features in line. So my first task is, what do you think of when you heard the word Gothic? Mind map all of your ideas for me. So the word Gothic can actually mean many different things. It doesn't just refer to the literary movement of Gothic fiction. So the word Gothic can refer to a medieval style of architecture characterised by pointed arches and ornate stone masonry. So if you look at this image here, you can see that, so really kind of sharp tops, this whole brickwork style, obviously the ironwork. All designed, you know, to be very kind of medieval in its style. Can also link to a gloomy, morbid style of fashion and makeup dominated by the colour black. So we've got this lovely lady here, look, who is wearing a Gothic style outfit. So she's wearing lots of blacks, dark purple, the hair is black and makeup's quite dark. It can also refer to a gloomy, morbid genre of music popular in the early 1980s. So Gothic could refer to a type of music. And it can also, which is the one we're interested in, refer to a genre of literature focused on terror that was first popularised in the 18th century by Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto. So, with this in mind, what we're going to spend the next couple of lessons doing is having a look at Gothic in a little bit more depth so that you can really understand what it is to write a Gothic piece of fiction. So, all of these images here on this slide are linked to the Gothic. What I'd like you to do is to see if you can pair them up, and I'd like you to pair them based on their shared traits. So what that means is there anything that they have in common with each other? So for instance, an example might be, so number 3 and number 6 are both focused around trees. They're very bare and barren trees, aren't they? They haven't got lots of leaves on them, so they look quite dead. And they're also both quite focused on dark evenings. So I'd like you to have a go at that. Obviously, I know some of you won't be fortunate enough to have a printer at home, or it might be difficult for you to print things out. So that's why there's numbers on the pictures. So you can just write the numbers down in your book and then explain why you would match them up, okay? So it's a little bit of a game of snap, really. And I'll also make sure that my head's not in the corner so you can't see picture number 12. So you might be thinking to yourself, why is Gothic such a big thing? You know, why is it such a why is it a fiction in itself? And the reason is because it kind of had just a phase in life where everyone really enjoyed it. And in fact, everyone enjoyed it that much that the word Gothic actually has several different meanings. So we've already established that it covers several different topics in our starter today. But actually, using a capital G and a lowercase g also changes its meaning. So if you use a capital G, like this example here, it's classed as a proper noun, which I'm sure you'll all remember from primary school. We don't really talk much about proper nouns here, do we? And the idea is that it refers to a specific genre or movement. So that is talking about Gothic fiction. Yeah, it's talking about the time period in which this style of writing was created. Gothic with a lowercase g is an adjective, and it describes something as being Gothic in a general sense. Okay. So even without having been taught it, people do tend to have a sense of what Gothic is and are able to recognise it. I know a lot of you, I've heard you calling people Goths before when they've got dark hair, which is something we used to do as teenagers too. And again, it does kind of fit in with this idea of the Gothic, doesn't it? You know, dark hair being related to darkness and blackness, which we've just seen that, you know, people who do like the Gothic think about. So, out of curiosity, let's see if we've got any IT whizzes out there. Which of these fonts could be described as Gothic? And I want you to think about why you think that one is the Gothic one. Okay? So, I hope you've had a little think about my handwriting task. So, I'm curious to know which one you think falls into the Gothic. So, let me know on Show My Homework. However, it might pain you to know that actually all of these come under the Gothic characteristics of writing. Okay, So the first one, font number 1, this one here, is said to be Gothic because of its strict, regulated form of lettering. Okay, so it's almost like a typewriter, which relates to the past, obviously, and a form of writing that was before technological advancement. And the Gothic usually plays more kind of part in the past than it does in the future. The second one, this form of handwriting, again, that kind of lucid joining of the letters is designed to be Gothic in the fact that it essentially is something that we would expect from a Gothic letter, perhaps. And letter writing was obviously a prominent form of contact during these time periods because obviously technology wasn't as advanced. Font 3 being very similar to font 1. Again, this one is said to be Gothic because of its thickness and its colour. Again, linking back to those ideas of Gothic that we looked at previously. Font 4, the same as font 2 in the fact that it's designed to be like a handwritten response. Font 5 being similar to font 1 and font 3, and that it's very strict and regulated in the style that it's written. So I suppose you're probably thinking to yourself, why have I spoken to you about handwriting? But I wanted to show you that Gothic actually isn't just one thing, it's lots of things. And to be able to pin down Gothic features is quite difficult. But actually, I think you'll be surprised by how many Gothic features there are. So with that in mind, we are going to test out your knowledge of the Gothic already. So I have given you a very typical Gothic picture. And what I'd like you to do is annotate this with anything that you think links to a Gothic genre. So anything at all about this image that makes it feel Gothic to you. Again, if you've not got a printer, it's not a problem. What you can do is just name certain bits and then write down how you think that represents the Gothic. So just to give you a couple of ideas then, I thought we'd go over this together, okay? So there's a couple of features that absolutely stand out to us. So the first thing I'm hoping you've thought about is the dark clouds, okay? So weather plays a large part in Gothic and in Gothic fiction and in Gothic literature, okay? Usually dark, gloomy, rainy, stormy weather is what we would expect to see the setting in, okay? You could think about the cross here. So this is a form of Gothic fiction. Obviously anything to do with kind of religion. So heaven, hell, angels, devils, that sort of thing, supernatural, all kind of comes under the Gothic genre. We've got the crow here. And we've had to think about this before, haven't we? So we've spoken about connotations when we were looking at poetry, but kind of the links that we make with crows. So obviously they're a bird that come around when something's died to signify death. So we expect to see them used quite a lot in Gothic fiction because we expect there to be quite a lot of death within it. We've got a house, again in that medieval style that we saw previously, but it's also isolated and alone. So it's in the middle of nowhere. Again, a great setting for a Gothic piece. We can obviously see that there are a few lights on, so kind of the mystery behind who might live there. Okay, this bit here as well, so kind of cliffside, water. Obviously, easy death can come to people like that, but being surrounded by a river or something, so cut off from society. And obviously cliff sides themselves have their own kind of set of scary things. So there's lots more on here that I'm sure you've picked up, but I just wanted to discuss a couple with you. And obviously we're going to build and develop on these ideas in our next couple of lessons. But just to finish off today, I just wanted to talk you through the Gothic literature timeline. So where Gothic literature really came from. So Gothic literature is Gothic writing, okay? So literature is anything that can be read, written, that sort of thing. So in 1764, so this is an important date for us, was the first Gothic novel, okay? And it was called The Castle of Toronto, okay? And the reason that it was decided to be the first Gothic novel was because it had the first Gothic sensibilities in terms of it had the first kind of Gothic features. So the emergence of a literary genre coincides with a revived interest in medievalism and a growing public fascination in the supernatural. So the idea was that people during this period were becoming more interested in the past and what life was like during the past, but they also were starting to think about the supernatural and whether the supernatural was real or whether it would have any implications on life. And that was kind of what came through in Gothic literature, so this exploration of the past but also the supernatural. So The Castle of Otranto was the first recorded Gothic novel, and that was in 1764. In 1794, Anne Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho is a roaring success and introduces the explained supernatural, whereby terrifying, apparently paranormal plot points have a logical explanation in the end. So again, this exploration of supernatural became even more in depth, but always coming to some sort of logical explanation at the end. So you imagine it's like saying that you've seen a ghost. You wake up and realise that it's your clothes piled up on your chair, and it's just because you were tired and you've woken up from a dream and you're imagining it. But this writer obviously brought those ideas into reality and said that, you know, many people might believe in the supernatural because of these kind of logical explanations that come from the endings. In 1816, I'm sure you've all seen this man before, but during a stormy night in an old mansion on the banks of Lake Geneva, Lord Byron, a man described as mad, bad and dangerous to know, sets his friends the challenge of writing a ghost story, and the results included The Vampire and Frankenstein. So subgenres like Gothic horror and vampire fiction are going strong today. I'm sure you've all heard of Twilight. I know I certainly did. That was one of my favourite books when I was a teenager. But obviously vampire fiction, so The Vampire Diaries. I know some of you in Year 8, some of the Year 8 girls have been reading that, and I know you're interested in the TV series. I know there's a programme called Teen Werewolf, isn't there? And obviously lots of Gothic fiction nowadays has continued with this idea of Frankenstein and the vampire. So in 1816, it was kind of the start of the creation of the supernatural, really. Previously, they'd thought about its existence, whereas now we were thinking about creatures that were going to be, you know, more than the supernatural. So in 1818, the conventions of Gothism, old dark buildings, spooky goings-on and vulnerable heroines are so well established that they're ripe for parody by Jane Austen in Northanger Abbey. Again, if you've ever read Northanger Abbey, well done. It's a really hard book to get through as a teenager. But the idea is that not only were people starting to think about the Gothic, but people starting to take the mick out of the Gothic, which I'm sure you've all seen a spoof film before. But the idea is that, you know, some people were starting to tire a little bit of the Gothic fiction, and that's when they obviously started to kind of parody it and take the fun out of it. And then in 1886, we had The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and it's a classic example of Victorian Gothic, and the themes of Dublin predating Freud's ideas of split personalities. So again, they were starting to look at this from a scientific point of view, thinking about whether there was an actual reality to people being able to have split personality disorder, which obviously we know nowadays is a genuine medical condition, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was kind of a representation of that. But it's about that kind of over-the-top supernatural element, isn't there? That, you know, Mr. Hyde was so kind of, I guess, unknowing of what was going on around him, really. So I hope you've enjoyed our first lesson on Gothic literature. As I said to you before, I really do love this unit of work. I just think it's so interesting to think about where a genre originated from. You know, that Castle of Otranto. Why did someone all of a sudden decide to write a piece of Gothic fiction, and how did then it all of a sudden become, you know, quite a big thing? So I hope you've enjoyed today's lesson. Make sure you've got plenty of notes down. There is a Show My Homework quiz, and obviously I look forward to another Gothic fiction lesson with you tomorrow.